The marketplace was alive with color and noise. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved through the crowded streets, their voices mixing into a strange melody of clicks, hums, and roars. Bright banners fluttered in the wind, advertising everything from rare crystals to high-tech gadgets. Humans were not common here, and Jax, a lone mechanic from a distant mining planet, felt both out of place and oddly at home. He wandered slowly, letting his eyes drift over the various stalls. Most of the creatures for sale were strong, fast, or dangerous. There were glowing insects in glass cages, small robotic pets that could think for themselves, and even some creatures that could change their shape at will. But nothing caught Jax's attention, until he heard a weak, raspy sound coming from the far end of the auction hall. He turned a corner and saw a small, sickly dragon lying in a metal cage. Its scales were dull and dusty, and its tiny wings trembled as it tried to lift them. Its eyes were half closed and its breaths came in short, weak huffs. Most bidders ignored it, laughing or shaking their heads. The auctioneer called for the next round of bids, but no one seemed interested. Jax felt a strange tug in his chest. He didn't know why, but he couldn't walk away. The dragon looked fragile, almost like it was about to disappear if it weren't cared for. He knelt in front of the cage, careful not to make a sudden movement. The dragon's head lifted slowly, and for a moment their eyes met. It was a tiny, almost invisible connection, but Jax felt it strongly. "What's wrong with it?" he asked the auctioneer, who shrugged. "Don't know," the auctioneer said. "It's weak. Might not last the week. Nobody wants it." Jax's hands clenched into fists. He knew the dragon deserved a chance. He could fix things. Machines, engines, ships, he could repair them all. But maybe, just maybe, he could help this dragon too. The bidding began. Jax watched as other bidders raised their offers for the flashier creatures. The fast-winged birds, the shimmering lizards, and even a tiny alien that could disappear at will. But nobody touched the sickly dragon. Jax felt a strange mix of anger and hope. He didn't care what it cost. This creature needed him. He raised his hand. "I'll take it," he said. The auctioneer looked surprised. "Are you sure? This one is fragile." "I'm sure," Jax said. The room went quiet for a moment, then laughter broke out from a few aliens. "A human buying that weak thing? Ha!" One of them sneered. Jax ignored them. He had never been afraid of challenges. He had repaired broken ships that everyone else said were beyond fixing. This dragon might be sickly, small, and weak, but he knew humans had something special. We never give up easily. The bidding continued for a few tense minutes, but no one else raised their hand. Finally, the auctioneer hammered his gavel. "Sold. To the human." Jax carefully lifted the cage. The dragon hissed softly, more like a weak sigh than a threat, and leaned its tiny head against his arm. A warmth spread through him. Somehow it knew he was different. It wasn't just a buyer. He was someone who could be trusted. He carried the dragon out of the auction hall. The crowd parted to let him pass, some shaking their heads, others whispering about the strange human who bought a dying dragon. Jax didn't notice them. All he could think about was the small creature in his arms. Its wings twitched and its eyes blinked slowly as if testing him. The journey back to his workshop was long. The streets were crowded with aliens and their strange vehicles, but Jax moved steadily, holding the dragon carefully. When he finally reached the small, cluttered building that served as his home and workshop, he set the cage down gently. He knelt beside it. "Don't worry," he said softly. "We'll get you fixed." The dragon let out a tiny puff of smoke, almost like a cough, but it nuzzled closer to him. Jax smiled. It was a small gesture, but it felt like the beginning of something important. For Jax, life had always been about fixing things. Broken engines, damaged ships, machines no one else could repair. But now, for the first time, he felt the responsibility of saving something living. Not a machine, not a vehicle, but a creature that had been overlooked and dismissed. He didn't know how long it would take or if the dragon would survive. But he knew one thing: he wouldn't give up. He had learned that humans had a way of fighting against impossible odds, not with strength, but with determination and heart. And maybe, just maybe, this weak little dragon would teach him something too. That night, as Jax worked to prepare a warm bed and healing foods for the dragon, it curled against him, trembling but calm. Its tiny heart beat against his chest, a fragile rhythm that seemed to say, "I trust you." And in that moment, Jax felt a quiet power. It wasn't in machines or engines or even in humans alone. It was in the bond they were forming, a bond that might change more than just one life. The auction was over. The crowd had gone. But for Jax and the sickly dragon, the real story was just beginning. Back in his small workshop, Jack set the dragon down gently on a soft blanket he had laid on the floor. The room smelled of oil, metal, and engine grease, but Jax made a space as warm and safe as he could. The dragon, still weak, tried to lift its head, blinking slowly. Its wings twitched and a tiny puff of smoke curled from its nostrils. It was small, almost fragile, but something about it seemed stubborn, like it didn't want to give up. Jax sat beside the dragon, studying it carefully. He had repaired broken starships, engines, and machines that others said were impossible to fix. Maybe this creature could be fixed too. He cleaned its scales gently with a damp cloth, noticing how fragile they felt under his fingers. The dragon let out a soft hiss, but it didn't struggle. It seemed to sense that Jax meant no harm. He opened his toolbox and began making a small healing pod. Using old heating pads, soft lights, and some recycled equipment, he built a space where the dragon could rest and get warmth. "This should help you recover," he said softly. The dragon blinked at him, tilting its head in curiosity, almost like it understood his words. Feeding the dragon was harder. It refused most of the foods he offered. Jax experimented with nutrient gels, soft fruits from another planet, and warm liquids. Slowly, it started to nibble at the gels, making tiny, careful movements with its mouth. Each time it ate, Jax felt a small spark of hope. Days passed and the dragon grew a little stronger. Its wings lifted more confidently, and it began to make quiet noises that sounded like purring. At night, it would crawl close to Jax and rest its head on his shoulder. He felt a warmth he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just the dragon healing, it was the bond between them growing stronger. Word of the human and the dragon began to spread. Some of Jax's neighbors whispered about it in the streets, watching as he cared for a creature that others had abandoned. Humans were not known for their patience in this marketplace full of exotic beings. They were clever and strong, yes, but this human showed something rare: kindness without expectation. One evening, Jax was repairing a small engine when he felt the dragon nuzzle his hand. It let out a soft smoke puff and blinked at him, its eyes brighter than before. "You're getting stronger," Jax said, smiling. "We're going to make it through this, I promise." The dragon made a small chirping sound in response. As the days turned into weeks, the dragon's scales grew shiny, and its wings stretched longer and stronger. Jax watched in awe as it tried to flap them, almost flying around the small room. Sometimes it would accidentally knock over a few tools and Jax would laugh, shaking his head. It was clumsy but full of life. The dragon had begun to trust him completely. It would follow him around the workshop, sometimes curling around his feet when he worked. Jax noticed that whenever he felt tired or discouraged, the dragon's small gestures, nudging him with its nose, resting its head on his lap, gave him energy. It was strange, he thought, how a creature so small could teach him so much. He also realized that the dragon had its own intelligence, sharper than he expected. It would watch him closely when he worked on machines, tilting its head as if trying to understand. When he left the room for a moment, the dragon would carefully move toward the open tools or objects, sniffing them as though it were learning. Jax laughed softly, amazed by its curiosity. Then came a moment that would stay with Jax forever. One night, as he sat quietly in the workshop, the dragon crawled onto his chest and curled against him. Its tiny claws rested gently on his shoulders, and it nuzzled his neck, letting out a quiet, rhythmic purring sound. Jax felt tears prick his eyes. It wasn't just that he had saved the dragon, it was that the dragon had chosen him. It trusted him completely. It was a moment of understanding, of connection. Humans had a way of showing love and patience that some creatures could recognize immediately. And the dragon, for all its strength and wildness, responded to that human heart. In that quiet workshop, surrounded by tools and machines, two very different beings had formed a bond stronger than either could have imagined. Jax knew there would be challenges ahead. Other creatures might come looking for the dragon, thinking it belonged to them. The dragon might get sick again. But he didn't worry. He had learned something important. Kindness, patience, and care could work in ways that strength alone could not. The dragon shifted slightly and looked up at him, its eyes reflecting the soft light of the workshop. It let out a tiny puff of smoke, almost like a sigh of contentment. Jax smiled and stroked its head gently. "We'll face everything together," he whispered. And in that quiet moment, the healing was not just for the dragon. Jax felt a warmth in his own heart, a new understanding of what it meant to protect and care for another being. He realized humans could be extraordinary not because of their strength or machines, but because of their courage to love and their willingness to fight for those who could not fight for themselves. By the time the night ended, the dragon had fallen asleep curled against him. Jax sat back in his chair, exhausted but happy. He knew this was just the beginning of a story that would change both their lives. He had saved a creature no one else believed in, and in return the dragon had shown him a new kind of strength. Together they would face whatever the universe sent their way. And somehow Jax knew they were ready. By now Ember, the dragon, had grown noticeably stronger. Its scales shimmered with shades of red and gold, and its wings were no longer trembling but stretching and flapping with confidence. The small workshop, once filled with the smell of oil and metal, now also carried the faint warmth of dragon smoke and the soft sounds of its gentle purring. Jax had come to love the little noises. Each tiny hiss or soft chirp felt like a conversation. From morning till night, Ember followed Jax everywhere. When he repaired engines or machines, the dragon would perch nearby, tilting its head curiously as if studying every movement. Sometimes it would nudge loose tools with its snout, or paw at a small gear as though it were helping. Jax laughed more than he had in years. The dragon was learning quickly, and Jax realized that caring for a creature was very different from fixing a machine. It required patience, understanding, and a kind of gentle persistence he had never needed before. Jax began to notice subtle things about Ember. It seemed to recognize his moods. When he was tired or frustrated after a long day of repairing a particularly stubborn starship engine, the dragon would climb onto his lap or curl against his chest. Its warmth and soft presence calmed him, reminding him that even in a busy, harsh galaxy, moments of quiet care were priceless. One afternoon, Jax worked on a particularly complicated piece of machinery. Sparks flew and the metal clanged loudly. Ember watched silently at first, then let out a small, sharp hiss and leapt forward, nudging Jax's shoulder with its snout. Startled, he looked down and saw the dragon pointing its claws toward a small valve he had overlooked. Following Ember's guidance, Jax adjusted the valve, and the engine roared to life perfectly. You're a good helper," Jax said, smiling widely. Ember chirped softly, almost as if proud of itself. Jax realized that humans weren't the only intelligent beings in the galaxy. Dragons, too, had their cleverness and instincts. But what set humans apart, he thought, was the way they could form bonds, understanding each other in ways no tool or machine could measure. As the days passed, the bond between the mechanic and the dragon grew even stronger. Jax began teaching Ember simple tricks: how to fetch small tools, how to sit still while he worked, even how to guard the workshop from intruders. Ember learned quickly, eager to please its human companion. Sometimes it would accidentally knock over a bucket of oil or scatter wrenches across the floor, but Jax would only laugh and clean it up. Mistakes were part of learning, he told himself, and part of forming a true partnership. Night times were the most special. Jax would sit on the floor, leaning against a stack of crates, and Ember would curl against his chest. Its breathing was steady, its tiny claws resting gently on him. In those moments, Jax felt something deep and unexplainable. He felt trust, acceptance, and the quiet power of connection. No matter how dangerous the galaxy could be, this small dragon had chosen to rely on him. It had made him family just as he had made it his own. Word of their bond slowly began to spread. Other humans and aliens in the city whispered about the mechanic and his dragon. Some called it foolish, saying no creature should rely so heavily on a human. Others watched with curiosity, noting how the dragon's strength and confidence grew under Jax's care. It was strange to see a human and a dragon forming a partnership unlike anything the galaxy had witnessed. Humans were clever and strong, yes, but their empathy, this willingness to protect and care, was something even the fiercest aliens respected in silence. One day, while Jax polished a small spacecraft engine, Ember climbed onto his shoulder and sniffed curiously at a glowing panel. It let out a soft puff of smoke and tapped the controls lightly with its claw. The engine responded perfectly. Jax chuckled. "I swear you understand more than some of my clients," he said. Ember chirped proudly, nuzzling his cheek. It was a simple act, but it reminded Jax how unique their bond had become. Ember wasn't just a dragon anymore. It was a companion, a helper, a friend. And Jax had learned that humans had a rare kind of strength, the ability to care, to nurture, and to fight for something without expecting anything in return. The dragon had been weak and sickly when he first found it, but under his care, it thrived. And in a strange way the experience had changed Jax too. He realized that strength wasn't only measured in engines repaired or machines built, it was measured in the courage to love, to protect, and to form a bond that could survive any challenge. That evening, as the sun set behind the distant skyline of alien towers, Ember stretched its wings fully for the first time. Jax watched with pride, feeling a sense of accomplishment deeper than any engine he had repaired. The dragon leapt and flapped clumsily around the room, smoke curling from its nostrils, and then landed gently, curling back against Jax's chest. "You've grown strong," he whispered, running his fingers along its warm scales. "But remember, strength isn't everything. Trust, patience, and heart, that's what makes us unstoppable." Ember blinked slowly as if understanding every word, and let out a small, happy chirp. The bond between Jax and Ember was no longer simple human and creature. It was a connection of trust, loyalty, and love, a partnership that neither time nor challenge could break. And in a galaxy full of danger and uncertainty, that bond was more powerful than any weapon, more remarkable than any machine, and more extraordinary than anyone could have imagined. Together, they were ready for whatever the universe might send their way. And for the first time, Jax realized that the galaxy was full of surprises, but none as beautiful as the one curled against his chest. One morning, Jax was working on a small hover engine when a loud knock shook the door of his workshop. He looked up and his heart skipped a beat. Standing at the entrance were three alien figures, tall and armored, their glowing eyes fixed on him. Their voices were deep and harsh, filled with authority. "This dragon belongs to us," one said, pointing at Ember. "You cannot keep it." Jax set down his tools slowly and stood. He felt Ember stir behind him, curling close to his legs. The dragon's wings twitched, small puffs of smoke escaping its nostrils. Jax's chest tightened, but he stood firm. "It's not yours," he said calmly. "Ember chooses who to be with, and it has chosen me." The aliens exchanged glances and one stepped forward. "Humans do not understand the balance of life. You took what is not yours. You will return it or there will be consequences." Jax felt a surge of determination. He had faced broken engines, collapsing starships, and impossible repairs. But he had never backed down from protecting something he cared about. "I won't give it up," he said. "You can try, but you'll find it's not that simple." Ember hissed softly and pressed against Jax's chest. Its small body trembled, but it did not cower. Somehow, Jax knew it understood the danger, and trusted him completely. The dragon had grown strong under his care, but its heart belonged to him now. The aliens advanced, but Jax remained steady. He didn't have weapons, only his tools and the quiet confidence that humans often had, a stubborn courage that could surprise stronger, faster beings. He had learned that humans didn't always fight with force. Sometimes, the most powerful weapon was determination and the bond between friends. One alien reached out, trying to grab Ember, but the dragon reacted in an unexpected way. Instead of breathing fire or striking, it curled tightly against Jax, letting out soft, steady puffs of smoke. It pressed its tiny head to his chest, its eyes meeting his. There was trust, courage, and defiance in that gaze. The aliens paused, confused. They had expected resistance, attack, or fear, but not this quiet, unbreakable bond. Jax took a slow step forward. "See this?" he said softly. "This isn't about strength. It's about trust. Ember chooses me and I will protect it. No weapon, no threat can change that." The lead alien studied the pair, his glowing eyes narrowing. He had seen dragons respond to fear or punishment, but never to patience, care, and love. Ember's small chest rose and fell against Jax's, and it hissed softly, not in anger but in protection. The human's courage had become a shield that no force could penetrate. After a tense moment, the alien leader spoke. "Perhaps, humans are different than we thought. You have not forced the dragon. You have earned it. This is unusual." Jax didn't move. He only continued to stroke Ember's scales gently. "Different doesn't mean weak," he said. "Sometimes, it means stronger than anyone expects." The other aliens shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. They had come prepared to take the dragon, expecting an easy victory, but they realized that strength alone was not the deciding factor here. The dragon had bonded with the human, and that bond was stronger than any threat. Finally, the leader gave a small nod. "Very well. The dragon is yours. But know this, few humans would survive such a test." Jax exhaled slowly, relief flooding him. Ember twitched and nudged his hand, as if understanding the danger had passed. Its tiny eyes were bright and alert, its wings lifted slightly in a relaxed stretch. The dragon was safe, for now, but the encounter had shown Jax something important. Strength, speed, and power mattered less than courage, trust, and heart. He watched as the aliens left, their armor clanking softly against the floor. The workshop felt quiet again except for Ember's gentle breathing. Jax knelt beside the dragon and whispered, "See? We make a good team, don't we?" Ember responded with a soft puff of smoke and a tiny chirp, curling closer to him. That night, Jax and Ember sat together by the small window of the workshop, watching the twin moons rise over the city. Jax thought about the events of the day. The aliens had come with strength, expecting to claim what they wanted. But humans had a different kind of power, resilience, empathy, and the courage to protect others. And in that moment he realized that these qualities could change the galaxy in ways no weapon ever could. Ember shifted, nudging his hand gently. Jax smiled. The dragon had grown stronger, yes, but it was the trust between them that had carried them through. And that bond, he knew, would only continue to grow. Humans were remarkable, he thought. Not because they could build machines, fly ships, or fight battles. They were remarkable because they could form connections, protect those weaker than themselves, and face danger with courage and heart. And Ember, his small, brave dragon, had shown him that trust and loyalty could be the strongest forces in the universe. Together they had survived the challenge. Together they were ready for anything. The stars outside twinkled quietly, as if the galaxy itself was watching and waiting to see what humans and their unusual allies could do next. Jax held Ember close, knowing that whatever came they would face it side by side. The challenge was over, but the story, the bond, the trust, the courage, was only growing stronger. Months had passed since Jax had first brought Ember home. The small sickly dragon had grown into a strong, confident creature. Its wings now stretched wide, its scales glimmered with brilliant red and gold, and its eyes sparkled with intelligence and mischief. But more than its strength, what made Ember remarkable was the bond it shared with Jax. A bond built on trust, care, and the quiet courage of a human who refused to give up. Word of Jax and Ember's story spread slowly at first. Neighbors whispered about the mechanic who had saved a dying dragon when no one else had cared. Traders from other planets spoke of the unusual pair, marveling at how the tiny dragon had grown strong under the care of a single human. Humans were often underestimated in the galaxy. They were clever, yes, and sometimes strong, but many creatures thought them fragile compared to other species. Jax and Ember began to change that perception. One day a small crowd gathered outside the workshop. Merchants, travelers, and curious aliens watched as Ember playfully circled Jax's feet, occasionally leaping onto his shoulder. Children from nearby streets squealed in delight, while adults shook their heads in disbelief. A small alien merchant stepped forward and said, "I have never seen a dragon respond to a human like this. I trust you completely. You are different." Jax smiled, gently scratching Ember's head. "It's not about being different," he said. "It's about caring and not giving up when things seem impossible. That's what humans do." The story soon reached the council of a nearby planet, a group of leaders who had long assumed humans were weaker than other species. Curious, they came to witness Jax and Ember for themselves. They watched as the dragon interacted with Jax, curling against his chest, nudging him when he worked, and following his instructions with remarkable precision. The council members murmured among themselves. They had seen strength in weapons, in speed, in massive armies, but never in patience, empathy, or the courage to protect something fragile simply because it needed help. Over time, Jax and Ember became a symbol across planets. Stories were told of the human mechanic who had saved a sickly dragon, not for profit or fame, but because it was the right thing to do. The dragon had chosen its human family, and the human had risen to the challenge with heart and determination. It became a legend in the galaxy, not because of destruction or power but because of kindness and bravery. Jax, of course, continued his work as a mechanic. Engines, starships, machines, he repaired them all. But now, wherever he went, Ember accompanied him. The dragon had learned to help in small ways, nudging tools, observing his work, and sometimes even warning of danger. Together they were unstoppable, not because of force but because of their trust and teamwork. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the city, Jax and Ember sat on the roof of the workshop. Ember stretched its wings lazily and let out a soft puff of smoke. "You've grown strong," Jax said, his fingers tracing the dragon's warm scales. "But strength alone isn't enough. Heart, courage, that's what makes us who we are." Ember chirped softly, leaning its head against him. The galaxy had many dangers, many challenges, but Jax had learned something important. Humans had a unique power. They could face impossible odds, not because they were the fastest, the strongest, or the smartest, but because they could care for others, fight for them, and form bonds that nothing could break. Ember had shown him that courage and trust could be stronger than any weapon, brighter than any star, and more remarkable than any machine. News of the human mechanic and his dragon spread to distant planets. Young humans looked up to Jax as a hero not because he wielded power but because he had the courage to care. Alien species began to see humans in a new light. The once overlooked species, known more for their cleverness than strength, was now recognized for something far more powerful: their heart. As years went by, Jax and Ember traveled together. They helped people and creatures in need, repaired broken ships, and faced challenges that seemed impossible. Everywhere they went, stories followed them, inspiring others to act with courage and kindness. Children laughed as they watched Ember leap and play, while adults learned a lesson in determination and empathy. One quiet night, Jax looked at Ember, curled against his chest, and smiled. "We've done well, buddy," he whispered. Ember blinked slowly, letting out a soft puff of smoke as if agreeing. They had faced danger, defied expectations, and shown the galaxy that humans could be extraordinary, not through power alone but through heart, patience, and courage. The sickly dragon that once barely breathed now soared alongside its human, a symbol of trust and resilience. And Jax realized that the greatest adventures weren't always in distant stars or dangerous battles. They were in the bonds we choose to protect, the kindness we show, and the courage we carry in our hearts. Together, Jax and Ember became a living legend. Not because they conquered worlds but because they had changed them quietly, simply, with trust, care, and love. And in a galaxy full of chaos, that was the most extraordinary power of all.